This problem is multiple choice, asking which calculation will result in the final answer containing only 3 significant figures. We'll just work through the choices. In this first choice, we see multiplication. There's a number that has 6 sig figs that's multiplied by a number with 4 sig figs. If we review our rules, we'll see each of these zeros count as significant. First, because it's captive, and the second 0 is significant because it's a trailing 0 in a number with a decimal point. Our answer would contain 4 sig figs, so it's not a correct choice. The calculator answer to choice B contains 3 sig figs, and we'd be tempted that this is the answer. However, when we consider decimal places, as we must in subtraction addition, we can only use 1 decimal place, which means this result can only be expressed with 2 sig figs. Only 2 sig figs are justified, not 3. This is not a correct choice. We look at choice C. This is our calculator result. However, we can only go to 2 decimal places. 2 decimal places for this number results in 4 sig figs, so we know that choice C is not our answer. Choice D can only justify 1 decimal place. This number with 1 decimal place corresponds to 4 sig figs. That is also not the correct choice. So the correct answer here is choice E. None of these calculations will result in the final answer having only 3 sig figs. For questions 8 through 11, they're combination questions. We're going to write down the calculator answer first, then go back and determine the sig figs. So I've gone through and written down the calculator answer for each problem. Now we'll focus on sig figs. Looking at question 8, we see overall it's subtraction. We have this result subtracted from this result. So we need to focus on decimal places. We'll determine the number of decimal places in each of these numbers. The calculator result of this first calculation is 12.133. We see each of the numbers leading into the result have 3 sig figs. Since this is division, our result should have 3 sig figs. 3 sig figs for this number results in 1 decimal place. Looking at the second result, we see it's multiplication, a 4 sig fig number multiplied by another number with 4 sig figs. So our answer is limited to 4 sig figs. For this number, when we consider 4 sig figs, it results in a number that has 4 decimal places. Okay, so overall, we have a number with 4 decimal places subtracted from a number with 1 decimal place. We're limited to just 1 decimal place. So if we look at our final answer with 1 decimal place, appropriately rounded, is going to be 11.7. And that's our correct final answer. Question 9 is division. We see that there are 4 sig figs in the denominator, but we need to evaluate how many sig figs there are in the numerator. Here's our intermediate result of the numerator, but we see we can only go to 0 decimal places. With 0 decimal places, our result contains 3 sig figs. So we have a number with 3 sig figs divided by a number with 4 sig figs. We're limited to 3 sig figs, and our final answer, the first number we dropped is 5, so we round up, and our final correctly reported answer is 42.3. In question 10, we again have two intermediate values. We need to determine the number of sig figs in each of these intermediate values, and then we can use our rules for division to determine the sig figs in our final answer. Focusing on the numerator, we see this number has 2 decimal places. This has 3, so our answer is limited to 2 decimal places, which for this number results in 4 sig figs. Let's focus on the denominator. We see this is subtraction. Each of these numbers has 2 decimal places, so our result to this calculation should have 2 decimal places, and that results in a number with 5 sig figs. Now let's go to our overall problem. Our numerator, we now know, has 4 sig figs. From down here, our denominator has 5 sig figs. So in a division problem between 4 and 5 sig figs, we know that our overall answer is limited to 4 sig figs. So we can write our final correct answer as 0.08625. And we could notice that our calculator answer and our correct answer are identical. That happens sometimes. In question 11, we see this is all multiplication division, except that one of the numbers has an intermediate value. So we need to determine the number of sig figs in that calculation. So we see that there are 0 decimal places in the number 25, 2 decimal places here. The least number of decimal places, this is addition, is 0. So this intermediate result will have 0 decimal places, and this results in 3 sig figs. So we have a number with 3 sig figs multiplied by a number with 4 sig figs. This result has 3 sig figs, and in the denominator, 4 sig figs. So our least number of sig figs is 3. Our final answer should have 3 sig figs, and we report our final answer correctly as 1.14.